Okay guys, so today we are going to watch a video that explains the difference between estimating and rounding and talks about underestimates and overestimates. So first word we're going to talk about is rounding. Okay, rounding is a process that tells which multiple of 10, 100, 1000, etc. a number is closest to. Okay, so I took that definition straight from your math glossary. Rounding is just a process of saying, okay, round to this place value. Okay, it can be pretty much any place value. So I'm showing you a couple of examples. With 153, if I want to round to the nearest tens place, what I'm going to do is I go to the tens place, which is right here, and I look next door. Okay, remember, I know you guys have heard this many times before. Remember, so 5 or more, let it score. 4 or less, let it rest. Okay, so if I'm rounding to the tens place and I look next door, and this is a number that is less than 5, then this number stays the same. Okay, because 153, if I put it on a number line, would be closer to 150 than it would be to 160. So 153 rounds to 150. Then if I'm taking 153 and I want to round to the hundreds place, I do the same process. So I look at the hundreds place, I go next door, 5 or more, let it score, 4 or less, let it rest. So this is a 5, so that means that this 1 has to go up, so it goes to a 2. Because again, if I put 153 on a number line in between 100 and 200, it would be closer to 200. So 153 rounded to the hundreds place is 200. Now, this process works exactly the same no matter how big your number. So on this number, 2,090,008, I decided to round first to the millions. So I go to the millions place, which is right here. Again, I look next door. 5 or more, let it score. 4 or less, let it rest. Well, that's a 0. So the 2 stays the same. And remember, that means everything after the 2, because the 2 right here, the millions place, is where I wanted to round. So everything else after that place becomes a 0. So 2,090,008 rounds to 2 million. Okay. Also, down here, and I just realized looking at this that I made a mistake. So it's showing me here, I wanted to round to the tens place. Okay. So if I look here, this is the tens place. And so if I look next door, 5 or more, let it score. 4 or less, let it rest. That means that this 0 becomes a 10. Well, where I made my mistake is this 9 should still be there. Notice I forgot it over here because when I'm rounding to this tens place, anything before that place stays the same, and anything after that place where I'm rounding goes to a 0. So this really should have a 9 right here. That should be 2,090,010. Okay. All right, so then the next word is estimate. Again, I took this definition straight from your math glossary in the back of your textbook. So an estimate is to give an approximate value rather than an exact answer. Okay, so an estimate is 2 steps. First, you round to the desired place value. Okay, sometimes they'll tell you what to round to, but the general rule is if you don't know what place to round to, you round to the highest place value in common. Okay, after you round, you perform the operation. So whatever of the 4 operations it's asking you to do, add, subtract, multiply, or divide, after you round, then you do the operation, not the other way around. I know a lot of you are used to you do the operation first, so you add first, and then you take that answer and you round it, but that is actually not the same thing. So here's an example of underestimate. So an underestimate is an estimate that is actually less than the exact answer. So it's a close estimate, it's a close number, but it's less than the real answer. So in this problem, 701 plus 238, I want to round. And if you hear my dog in the background, I'm sorry, just ignore him. So 701, well, I should back up. Both of these numbers, both of these addends are in the hundreds place. So I want to round them both to the hundreds because that's the highest place value they have in common. So looking at 701, well, if I'm rounding to the hundreds and I look next door, there's nothing there. So this 7 should stay the same. So 701 rounds to 700. Notice that rounded down. Whoops. Okay, that rounded down, 701 to 700. Then with the 238, I'm rounding to the hundreds because they both have hundreds place. So I look next door. This is less than a 5, so the 2 stays the same. 238 is closer to 200 than it is to 300. So then I add them. 700 plus 200 is 900. So 900 is actually less than the real answer, but it's still a very close estimate. So here's an example of an overestimate. An overestimate is an estimate that is greater than the exact answer. It's still going to be close to the real answer, but it's going to be over. So again, I look and I see, well, both of these go to the hundreds place. So I'm going to round them both to the hundreds. Well, I look next door, and since this is 5 or more, that means that this 5 is going up to a 6, because 578 is closer to 600 than it is to 500. So I round it to 600. Looking here, again, I'm rounding to the hundreds because they are both in the hundreds. So I look next door, and this is 5 or more. Let it score, meaning the 6 turns to a 7, because 687 is closer to 7 than it is to 6. Excuse me, closer to 700 than it is to 600. So 600 plus 700 is 1,300. Now, this 1,300 is going to be more than the actual answer because both of those addends got overestimated. Okay, I rounded them up, and so that is going to be an overestimate. So here's another example of an overestimate. So both of these numbers are in the 10,000 spot. So I rounded them to the 10,000s. Well, 2, I look next door, that's 5 or more, so this 2 turns into a 3. So 28,173 rounds to 30,000. 18,217, I'm looking here at the tens, 10,000 place because they both have 10,000. I look next door, that's 5 or more, so this turns into a 2. 18,217 rounds to 20,000. And so 30,000 plus 20,000 is 50,000. So again, this number is going to be over the real answer right here because I rounded both of those addends up. And here's another one. So I put this in because I wanted to illustrate to you again. We want to round to the highest place value they have in common. So notice this goes to the 100,000 spot, but this is only in the 10,000 spot. So we want the highest place value in common, which would be the 10,000 spot. So I'm going to round them both to the 10,000. So looking next door, that's 5 or more, so this becomes a 6. Remember, everything after that is a 0, okay, because I'm rounding to this place value. So this number becomes 460,000. Notice that's way over, so that's part of the overestimate. Down here, I'm looking here at the 2, but I look next door. Well, that's 5 or more, so this 2 becomes a 3. So this number rounds to 30,000. And then I do my operation. So 460,000 minus 30,000 is 430,000. That is an overestimate, meaning this real answer is going to be less than 430,000, but it still should be close to it. And finally, we have an example of an underestimate. Again, I put this one in there because I want to illustrate to you that we round to the highest place value in common. So if I'm looking here, that means that I'm rounding to the millions spot. Okay, that's the highest one they have in common. So I'm looking here at the millions up here, 471 million. So this is the million spot. I look next door. It's less than a 5, so this 1 stays the same. Remember that if this is the place value I'm rounding to, everything before it stays the same. Everything after it turns to zeros. So this was the place we were at. So this whole number rounds to 471 million. So down here, again, I'm rounding to the million spot because that's what they have in common. So I'm looking next door. That is less than a 5, so the 2 stays the same. So everything after the 2 should become a 0 because then that rounds to 2 million. Okay? Now, this is an underestimate because both of these numbers rounded down. So when I add these together, I get 473 million. That means that this real answer right here would have to actually be more than 473 million because this was a underestimate. Okay, so that is kind of a crash course on estimating and rounding.